Hello guys, welcome back to my podcast, Conversations with Zalia, with your host is Zalia Lorraine. Today is Thursday, July 25th, 2024, and in today's podcast episode, we'll discuss and review the 2005 movie Beauty Shop. Now, I grew up watching this movie. I remember watching it a dozen times in the summer of 2012, and it's pretty much a very fun movie to watch. Very fun and great movie to watch. So, Beauty Shop is a 2005 movie sequel spin-off of the Barbershop franchise, directed by Billy Woodruff, that stars Queen Latifah as Gina, who works at an upscale white hair salon in Atlanta run by a man named Jorge. But when Jorge starts causing problems for her, she winds up quitting and decides to set up her own shop. And all the wacky hijinks that ensue. And after this movie, I'm thinking about discussing my final thoughts about this movie. So let's jump in. So the movie starts with Gina preparing for her day at work while her daughter, played by Tasha from Abrams Chris, is preparing to go to school. And Gina, she pretty much chastises her daughter for wearing an Alicia Keys hat, which her daughter wants to wear since she's attending a performing arts school, and she wants to look stylish, and she pretty much forces her to drop the hat. But her daughter, Vanessa, proves her correct when they arrive at the school, and when the girls at school is wearing the hat. Then, as Gina is going to work, she listens to a radio personality named Oliver and Helen, played by Trix from the Players Club, on her way to work. And at work, she's pretty much she just finished working on Joanne Marcus, played by Mina Suwari, and Joanne Marcus seems to be the best way to describe her character, she seems to have some connections. And then Jorge, who's played by Kevin Bacon, which a lot of people were shocked that he was played by Kevin Bacon, he pops up and pretty much gives a backhanded compliment about Gina's work on Joanne. And once Joanne leaves, he has a discussion about Gina upstaging him, which leads to Gina believing that Jorge said the N-word when he said moniker. And she discusses this with her coworker Lynn, who's pretty much the shampoo girl. In which Lynn repeats what she thought Jorge heard, in which Gina chastises said, you really can't say that word, but that's what Jorge said then. During her lunch break, Gina and Lynn have a conversation. Lynn shows off photos she did for a hair show of which she worked on the model's hair. which Gina is impressed by. Then the next day at work, because for those that don't know about Gina's backstory in the movie, Gina, her husband passed away, and she's living with her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law, I forgot the name of her mother-in-law, and her sister-in-law, Darnell, played by Rudy from The Cosby Show. But the next day at work, Gina, she's doing hair for another client, and pretty much Jorge interrupts her and says that she has to do the hair of, I forgot the name of the character, of Andy McDowell's character. I keep forgetting her name. If I don't remember the name of his characters, I'm going to refer to them by their actors. But Gina has, but pretty much Jorge has Gina do Andy McDowell's hair while he goes to a Pilates appointment. And before he leaves, he rips off a photo of Gina with the barbershop crew, telling her to find another place from her memories. And I should note, on a side note, the fact she has a photo of her with the barbershop crew confirms that this is a spin-off. And that the barbershop, that the Barbershop 2 movie happened before Beautyshop, which confused a lot of people because they're, in fact, which I'll get into with my final thoughts. But she does Indy McDowell's hair and has Lynn finish the hair of the client she was doing. Then, long story short, Jorge comes back from his Pilates class and discovers Lynn doing the hair of Gina's previous client, chastised her for pretty much not working on finishing Gina's work. Then Jorge and Gina has an argument, which Jorge makes snide remarks about Gina, saying that if it wasn't for him, she would have been be back at her mom's home doing hair in Chicago, which causes Gina to quit. Later on that night, Vanessa talks to Gina pretty much about her quitting work since it will affect her attending the former art school, and pretty much Gina reassures her that she'll be alright. Then next time, Gina is shown trying to get a loan, but the loan officer refused to give it to her because she doesn't have any credit. But she winds up convinces the loan officer to give her a loan, maybe a small loan, by doing her hair. And Gina uses this loan to set up her own beauty shop, which is pretty much a handover from the previous owner, Miss Angeline. And the entire montage is pretty much Gina and her family remodeling the salon, cleaning up the salon from the previous owner, and pretty much remodeling it to her style. And there's also during the scene that Gina meets the love interest Joe, played by Djimon Hounsou. I'm just looking at my show notes. Then the next scene, we're introduced to Miss Angeline's old beauticians. Chanel, played by Golden Brooks. Ida, played by Sherry Shepard. Miss Josephine, played by Opha Bordart. And Mercedes and Portia Mercedes, played by the babysitter from Base Chris and Pandora from Baby Boy. And they pretty much spend the entire scene in Mercedes, of course, they irk the heck out of me. They spend the entire scene complaining over pretty much everything in Gina's salon. But what causes Mercedes and Porsche to rage quit is pretty much Lynn arriving, and pretty much Gina saying that Lynn is going to work at the salon as a stylist, which got them upset and causes Porsche to say, "It's not like you're trying to brighten up the place, you're trying to brighten up the place," which causes Porsche Mercedes to quit, and they try to convince Chanel, but Chanel stays behind. And Gina asks whether or not if they're going to follow them, and they pretty much stay. But despite them remaining working in the salon, the salon girls, they pretty much don't treat Lynn well at all, thanks to her being the lone white stylist. In the shop, they have their first client, Mrs. Towner, played by the late Della Reese, who Lynn pretty much styles her hair. And there's a hilarious scene where Gina gets Mrs. Towner water and she uses it to dispose of her dentures. Then Lisa Ray and Kimura, they arrive as the clients of the previous of the previous. They're the clients of the previous owner, Miss Angelina, and they're pretty much, and both Lisa Ray and Kimura, they're wags. They're wags of basketball player. And they're planning on leaving until she decides to, until she convinces them, until she pretty much entices them to stay by doing her hair. And then the next colorful character we're introduced to is Willie, played by Lil JJ, who pretty much he's trying to sell candy bars to fund his music video directing career. And Willie, when he tries to sell, pretty much, and when he tries to sell to the women, he's pretty much selling it by making wild comments. And when he makes a wild, and when he makes an inappropriate comment about Gina's breast, he gets thrown out the store. Then the next day, they're having the stylist, they're having a conversation about Holler Helen's discussion at the Holler Helen's radio show, and pretty much the whole story arc with Lynn is that Lynn, she has a hard time fitting in with the black, fitting in as the only white stylist at the salon, with her attempts to fit in pretty much coming across as cringy, embarrassing, and pretty much not liked. And the only time she does successfully fit in was when she gets a makeover from Darnell, which is later on. But one of the things and this also happens in the same scene, where Holler and Helen states drops the N-word and name for a fictitious website when it was discussing how to get rid of crazy exes. Lynn states, "I didn't know you could say the N-word," which Chanel replies, "She could say it, you just can't." Which I'm not going to put my opinion on N-word privileges, but back to the story. Then Miss Josephine, who's pretty much supposed to be the Eddie character, a few members of Eddie character, she recites Maya Angelou's I Rise poetry, and when Lynn joins along, everyone just stares at her. Then meanwhile, Joe, the handyman, who also lives upstairs, also lives in upstairs from the salon, is heard playing his piano, which him and Vanessa wind up bonding on. Then the third night brings us the introduction of Catfish Rita, who's pretty much a food vendor that serves catfish dinners. And she tries to offer one to Queen Latifah. And there's always a running gag where every time she says monkey butt, she always makes a eek sound, a monkey sound. But Gina always rejects. But then again, Gina, she gets distracted when she notices Terry, which was Andy McDowell's character, by the way. I probably got her name wrong. I think it's Terry. Sorry, please correct me in the comment. She notices Terry mistaking some random black dude for a valet, which she pretty much gets the keys from the dude, and kind of find out the reason why Terry got lost, because one of Jorge's stylists did her hair wrong incorrectly to the point she looks like a scarecrow, which Gina fixes it. And then and pretty much she catches up a little bit with Terry. And there's always a recurring thing in the movie that Terry, she's always having issues with her husband, who's always busy for some reason. And the ladies at the salon suggest that her husband might be creeping on the low or cheating. And Terry, she brings up how pretty much ever since Gina left Jorge's beauty shop went away. And speaking of Jorge, she receives a phone call from Jorge apologizing for what happened with her, for her hair being scrubbed, and pretty much he tells her that Mindy has been released, and which Terry tells her that's okay and that Gina did her hair, and Jorge states, and Jorge pretty much states, Gina who? You know, Gina. Say hello, Gina. It's Gina Biatch, which got Jorge in a tizzy, but not only in a tizzy, but pretty much got Jorge big mad to the point he pretty much sows the seeds to pretty much destroy Gina. Then Gina goes out back with Lynn, and pretty much Terry brings up the Janet Jackson super performance, because remember, this movie took place in 2005, so they make certain references to certain pop culture references, all that, because Gina and Lynn, they have a discussion about Lynn not fitting in and how Lynn only had one customer. And pretty much Gina tries to assure her about that she will eventually fit in sometime. And how she bringing up how she was the only my nigga up at Jorge's. Then Terry is shown eating Catfish Rita's bills, but Catfish Rita is showing her that her bills are going to cause her to develop a natural BBL. And Gina becomes semi upset that she was eating Catfish Rita's bills. And then Inspector Crawford pops up out of nowhere, and gives him a fine. And Inspector Crawford is a recurring character and plays a part, and also foreshadowing. Pretty much, and also there was some heavy foreshadowing with that as well. And then she winds up picking up a package from a truck driver named James. In a press which tracks Chanel and the other salon lady's attention, and pretty much Gina hires James as a hairstylist upon realizing that he can do hair. And literally women are lining up on the block just to get their hair done by James. And he even settles a conflict with a bald customer and Reagan Gomez over who was first. And Gina, she winds up getting a phone call from Darnell, because she got arrested because the bike that she was riding in with her boyfriend, that she got from boyfriend, it was a stolen bike, and had to pay Darnell's bill, and as punishment, she has Darnell work at the salon, in which she's shown serving coffee or water to pre-fame Octavia Spencer, who states she can't drink or eat nothing that she can spell, which causes Chanel to make a snarky comment about Octavia Spencer. Then during the lunch break, while Gina leaves, the girls, they go out while Darnell gives Lynn a makeover that pretty much causes her to fit in with all the other girls. Meanwhile, Willie is filming his little booty hip hop video and comes across Vanessa and pretty much makes passes at her, trying to convince her to be in his music video. Then Gina, after a hilarious counter with this effeminate dude selling purses, which was one of the funniest parts of the movie. Gina comes back and discovers that Lynn has gotten a makeover. Now all the salon ladies like her now. Then they're working in the morning listening to Hollering Helen. Then unexpectedly the lights get shut down. And not only did the lights get shut down, but the shady Inspector Crawford is coming there, which Gina goes to Joe to pretty much fix the light problem, while she has Willie pretty much stall Mr. Crawford, which Joe does get the lights back on, and Mr. Crawford pretty much gives her a fine or a bill, which she can't keep. Says she can't keep up with. Meanwhile, and also amidst this whole situation, Darnell, she left the shop to go out with Birdman, of all people. And Darnell comes back with money, and when Gina questioned how the heck did she got that money, and pretty much Darnell refuses to disclose how she got it, which I feel like Darnell did something strange for her to pretty much get that money, but that's just me. And she still has Darnell work in the shop. Then Terry, she winds up returning back to the shop only to pretty much see if the catfish lady's here, since she got hooked on her food, and with Joanne, who now has her breast implants. And pretty much we're shown, and then Jorge is shown passing by Gina's shop, to which he was claiming bitch, which pretty much foreshadowing him sabotaging, which is also some heavy foreshadowing. Then while Gina and Joanne's doing her hair, pretty much Joanne's breast appearance causes the girls to have a conversation regarding plastic surgery or looks, which led to a heated argument between Chanel and Joanne, which will kind of be a big word about later on. Then Joanne tells Gina that then after tells Joanne that let me rephrase that. Joanne tells Gina that she's planning to make a deal with CoverGirl to pretty much produce Gina's hair potion, which if retroactively they couldn't find a better name for that. And the deal does wind up going through, which leads to Gina and Co celebrating. But before that, Willie tries to convince Vanessa to pretty much join in his rap video, and he says no. That Chanel catches James rapping to Salt and Pepper, which leads to Chanel to believe that James is queer down low. And also on the same day, Darnell's boyfriend Ghost visits Darnell, try to take her out on a date, and pretty much she refuses, and try to get an argument with her and pretty much try to pull her arm, which leads to Gina stepping in to defend, to pretty much step again to call him out, which leads to James when the argument gets heated, James steps in and pretty much Superman pretty much knocks out Ghost, which gets filmed by Willie, who's planning to sell it in the hood. But yeah, Gina's deal with CoverGirl to sell the hair crack does go through, and they decide to go out by celebrating. In which James and Lynn, they wind up becoming a couple and dance together while Joe and Gina fall in love. The next day, while they're packing the hair crack, Joanne inappropriately pretty much grabs James by the rear, which upsets Lynn and pretty much chastises her for it. And Chanel pretty much comes to Lynn's defense, which leads to an argument between Joan and pretty much Gina sides with Chanel, which causes Joan to call off the CoverGirl deal, which was freaking upsetting. Oh, but wait! There's more! Things get a lot more worser. Gina gets a phone call from Joe. And I forgot to mention this before I get into that while Willie was bicycling, he catches Inspector Crawford and Jorge, who in that previous scene came over, pretty much visited Gina's shop and realized pretty much just to not read the room, see how successful Gina's been to the point where some of his clients have deflected to Gina's. But Willie pretty much finds and films Inspector Crawford and Jorge having a conversation, revealing that Jorge was the one that had Inspector Crawford make various visits to Gina's salon, just sabotage her. And like I said, it gets worser. Gina gets a call from Joe. Joe finds out that her hair salon's been vandalized, which upsets Gina. And this happens on the eve of her daughter's concert, and Gina, she pretty much tries to keep a brave face throughout. And by the time she comes, and the whole scene is pretty much Gina lamenting pretty much what's going on with her salon. But when she comes back, her salon is remodeled. It has been rebuilt and remodeled with the help of some of the salon ladies, which includes Darnell, who's now making a change for herself and attending beauty school. And they wind up getting a customer in the form of Holler and Helen, who's on her way to, who needs to get her hair done on her way to her hair, which is pretty much a mess, on her way to a wedding. They want to do her hair. Then Willie visits Sean, pretty much shows footage of Inspector Crawford and Jorge, which causes Gina to confront Jorge. And during this conversation, pretty much Gina tells Jorge that she knows that Jorge has been in cahoots with Inspector Crawford to sabotage and destroy her business, but that Jorge was a whole ass fraud. You see, Jorge spends the entire movie passing himself off as some effeminate Australian hairstylist, when in actuality he's not Australian. He's not Australian, but he's from Nebraska, and his real name is George Christie. And when Jorge insults her, James and his goons, they pretty much attack Jorge. And the movie ends with Gina's hair salon getting a shout out from Holler and Helen and pretty much getting the cosign in the movie and happy ending. In conclusion, Beauty Shop was a very great movie, and it pretty much holds up well, especially in regards to pretty much how black small businesses, how they pretty much tend to get sabotaged by their competition. But Gina, in this case, Gina's salon being sabotaged by her former boss. And I should note that the movie is also set in Atlanta, which was at the time where Atlanta was starting to become the new hotspot, kind of like joining New York in the process. But and also I forgot to add to mention when I was discussing the movie that Terry, her client, Gina's client from Jorge, she decides to leave her husband and develop the natural BBL as a result of eating catfish for those dinners, which that's something I should have added earlier, but I'm just gonna add that. But anyways, back to the story. And also remember watching this movie a lot 12 summers ago, which is a great music and has a great soundtrack as well. And a great storyline. But the one thing that's kind of confusing me, or the one thing I'm kind of stumbled about, is there's some weird continuity thing, because in fact, in Barbershop 2, Gina, she was depicted as owning a shop that was right across from Calvin's. But come Beauty Shop, she's working at an upscale white hair salon. And unless it was owned by someone, which is weird in the movie, they made it seem as though she never owned her own shop, so... And it can't be, and so, in this movie can't be a prequel, because in fact, the photo that Jorge ripped off from her work mirror was Gina with the barbershop cast, so how did Gina went from owning her own hair salon to all of a sudden pretty much downgrading working at an upscale white hair salon? And by white, most of the customers and most of the clientele was well-off white people, and it's pretty much your stylish upscale hair salon. Unless I think you think of two theories. Either the shop that she worked at in Chicago was owned by another person, or she probably fell in some financial troubles when she lost her husband. Because in fact, the movie does show her living with her in-laws. And she had to pretty much, until she had to work at an upscale salon to pretty much support her family, including her daughter Vanessa, who's enrolled at a performing arts school. It's probably one of those, because of the fact how Gina said earlier out of school is expensive, more likely that's probably what took up all her money. But other than that, it was a good movie, and I hope that you enjoyed my commentary review on it. Now for the outro, my next podcast episode will be on another Queen Latifah led movie that I watched in my childhood called Bringing Down the House. And then the podcast episodes on that is Why Do Fools Fall in Love, which is a biopic on Frankie Lyman, or to be specific, a sidelong glance biopic on Frankie Lyman, since it only focuses on the 3 women that he was married to. And then starting in August, I will do some MJ podcast with some of the episodes I'm planning on that's on my mind is a podcast episode on Michael's love life, a podcast episode on how Michael was portrayed in media in the 2000s, and possibly a podcast episode on, and I'm thinking about doing and possibly a podcast episode on probably a story time podcast episode on which I'll think about. Let me rephrase that. The two MJ themed podcast episodes that I'm planning on doing is MJ's love life and how Michael was portrayed in media 2000, since the 2000s seemed to be the worst, the decade where that pretty much crapped on Michael the harshest. And they're also, and these two podcast episodes, they're also collaboration podcast episodes, so be tuned. So be sure to stay tuned. And now, depending on the circumstances, I may or may not make my Bring It Down to House podcast episode later on this week, but there it is, guys and alls. I hope you enjoyed my podcast episode. Be sure to follow me. Be on Instagram on Conversation with Zelia Podcast. If you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, email me at cwxpodcast@outlook.com or leave comments on the Spotify for Podcasters website. And you can listen to this podcast episode on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever this podcast is available at. I hope you have a wonderful evening. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye!